Hello, everybody. It's Patrick Heffernan here at TBR. It's exactly 1 o'clock, and we're going to wait for just a minute for everybody else to join the platform. So just hold tight, and we'll get started.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the TBR webinar series. Today, Practice Manager Patrick Heffernan and the entire TBR Professional Services team will be presenting the webinar 2022 Expectations, Insights from TBR's Professional Services team. Before we get started, just a few housekeeping notes. At the bottom of your screens, you'll see a series of buttons. From left to right, you can access the slides, audio controls, Q&A, speaker bios, a survey, information on TBR's 2021 webinars available for on-demand viewing, an exclusive free trial offer for folks on the webinar who are new to TBR, and a related content widget where you can download the slide deck and access other materials. These buttons on the bottom of the screen allow you to minimize each window to customize your webinar experience. You can also maximize the slides if you wish to view them in full screen. After the webinar, you will receive an email with a replay link, as well as a link to view and register for other TBR webinars. If you have any questions for us, please submit them via the Q&A widget in On24. You may also reach out to us after the event at webinars@tbri.com. Thank you again for joining us, and here's Patrick to begin the webinar.
Excellent. Thanks, Haley. So the internal working title for this webinar was actually Smiling Through the Apocalypse, because that's kind of what 2020 and 2021 were all about. It was a messy year, but one that we covered extensively in a lot of different ways. You can see innovation all over the slide, plus vendors breaking out of their business models, vendors really hitting their stride. What we want to do today is pull together some of the threads, the trends from 2021, start thinking about 2022 and beyond. But I wanted to start with this kind of messiness so you can see the wide range of the different issues that we're going to cover, the different trends that we're going to cover, and the way that we covered them in 2020. So what are we going to actually cover today? So we're going to talk about trends that emerged and matured in 2021, how we covered them. We're going to talk about new offerings and capabilities that were rolled out specifically to address some of the pandemic challenges. We're going to talk about technology trends that accelerated and the effects on IT services, consulting, and digital transformation. Then we're going to pivot to 2022 and to what trends we see carrying over from 2021 into or maybe emerging in 2022. And again, we're going to share how we intend to analyze these and share our research on these, on how the trends are going to change the market that we're covering. So you'll hear throughout this presentation not only what we think has been happening and what we think is going to happen, but how we're going to cover it, the way that we're going to approach our analysis of this market. And then we're going to end with something different that we haven't done before. We're going to have each analyst, and there are 9 of them that you're going to meet in a minute. Each analyst is going to make a 90-second pitch on a particular vendor or a particular trend that they think will differentiate, will disrupt, maybe dissolve, that would be cool to hear, or digitally transform in 2022. And then I'll wrap up that lightning round and I'll kind of score, well, maybe the top 3 pitches. Maybe I'll just decide who the winner is out of all those. So with that, you probably want to know who you're going to hear from today. So this is the cast of characters, and we could just go around and have each one of them introduce themselves, kind of going from left to right across the top, all the way to end with Megan on the bottom. So Elitsa, you're up first.
Hi, everyone. My name is Elitsa Bakauva. I'm a senior analyst in the professional services team. I lead our IT services benchmark research, and I'm also the expert on IBM, Accenture, Atos, and Capgemini.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is John Costas. I am senior analyst at TBR, and I direct our research program in the U.S. federal IT market.
Hi, my name is Kelly Laziska. I'm a senior analyst on our professional services team. I support on our IT services research as well as our management consulting research, and I lead our coverage of Fujitsu, Cisco, T-Systems, HCL, as well as EY and McKinsey.
Hi everyone, this is Boss Christoph, Principal Analyst on the Professional Services team. Lead a coverage on Accenture, Deloitte, KPMG, and Infosys. I also lead our research on digital transformation as well as global delivery benchmark.
Hi everyone, thanks for joining. I'm John Kroll. I'm an analyst with TBR in the professional services practice, and I cover TCS, Tech Mahindra, CGI, and I support work on some other companies and benchmarks, including the IT services benchmark.
Hello everybody, this is Evan Wollicott. I'm a senior analyst within TBR's cloud practice, covering companies such as Microsoft, Salesforce, and SAP, and I also work within the professional services group covering Cognizant and Wipro, and support also BOZ as part of the digital transformation group.
Hi everyone, I'm James Wickert. As a research analyst in our professional services team, I cover Boeing, L3 Harris, Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, and Raytheon.
Hello, my name is Kevin Colby. I'm a senior analyst here on Patrick's team in our services group. I cover some of the more hardware-centric firms, HPE and Dell Technologies, and through some acquisitions and divestments, I've also picked up coverage of DXC and NTT Data. Also lead some modeling on our healthcare IT services benchmark, and recently picked up the cloud professional services benchmark.
Hi everyone, my name is Megan Dilley. I'm a research analyst working under the professional services and cloud practices. I provide support and coverage for vendors such as Cognizant, Deloitte, Microsoft, Oracle, Salesforce, SAP, and Wipro.
Excellent, thanks everybody. And John Kroll earns an early point for being the politest analyst on the team, for actually thanking everyone for joining our webinar. So good for you, John, you're in the lead. And I just want to make sure everybody could say who they are and what they cover, because it just gives everybody that's listening here a feel for the range of the vendors that we cover and then how we cover them, which is, if you're new to TBR and the way we do our analysis, we look at companies from the bottom up. We look at each individual vendor, understand what is their strategy, what's been their performance, do those two things go together, where do we see them in the market, where do we see them going. So that's why we have individual analysts assigned to individual companies. So let's talk about what happened in 2021 and the trends that we're going to dive into a little bit today. There were a lot of reorganizations and some new strategies. 2020 was bad for everybody. So some of the IT services vendors and the consultancies that we cover took the opportunity in 2021 to shift gears, to reorient, to position for hopefully better times ahead. A second trend is around emerging technology that really did emerge. We have talked in previous webinars about the accelerated adoption of cloud and 5G. But what we realized over the course of 2021 was that wider adoption of those technologies led to other emerging technologies such as blockchain and IoT really surging in demand and fueling the digital part of digital transformation. And then the last thing, we saw and we heard some stories about professionals looking for somewhere else to go, somewhere new, some new challenge, some new opportunity. Obviously not everyone, but it's enough to cause some great big huge human resources headaches. So with that, let's start with that first trend, and we have to start, of course, with a bubble chart. That's who we are here at TBR, and I'm going to let Elitsa, who's the lead author on the IT services benchmark, explain this chart and some of what's in it, and the vendors that were covered in here. But I want to talk about one of the vendors real quickly who's actually not on this chart, who did make an organizational and a strategic shift in 2021, and that's PwC. They rolled out their new equation in the spring. We published a special report on this last month. You can find it on the website. I think it was November 17th. I want to share two key points about it. So yes, PwC did have some reorganization components, some new investments. But the two things that really struck me were the firm's emphasis on leadership and on trust. And those are loaded words. They can mean a lot. They can mean nothing. But when we went really deep under the hood with PwC, what we saw was a few things. One, they've committed within their own leadership to that new equation and to really changing the firm. So for them, leadership isn't just, going out there and selling it or selling how to be better leaders. It's actually their own leadership taking the lead. And then second is putting money into and time and really investing in leadership as a priority for their clients, how they can boost leadership within their clients, how they can help their clients become better leaders within their own organizations. And then on trust, every consultancy has to have it. It's fundamental, but what we think PwC is trying to do differently is not just build trust with clients, but build trust for clients. And that's an important distinction. They're not, meaning not just build trust with their clients, everybody needs that, meaning they're helping those clients of theirs build trust with their clients. It's sort of extending out the ecosystem. That's a heavy cultural change. It's a heavy lift. It's not an easy battleship to turn. So for us in 2022, it's going to be worth watching what happens as PwC starts to implement all of that. So now let's turn to Elitsa. She's going to walk through this graph and start on some of the vendors that are shifting their strategy and organization. So Elitsa, to you.
Thank you, Patrick. So this is a graph that came from the 2K21 IT Services Vendor Benchmark that we published in October. And essentially on this graph, we provide a positioning for the 30 IT services vendors that we cover in the benchmark. The landscape of the positioning is very diverse in terms of size and growth and profitability. The size of the bubble shows the size of revenue for each vendor, but we can clearly see the leaders in performance, which are clustered in the top right corner of the graph, and then the laggards in performance, which are towards the left corner of the graph, below the red average lines. So to continue with the examples about vendors changing their direction, I want to call out Atos. So Atos is one of the companies that has been going through internal reorganization lately and was able to accelerate revenue growth and improve profitability. At the beginning of 2020, Atos adopted an industry-aligned go-to-market approach and also an industry-aligned reporting structure, which was a change from the previously service line aligned reporting and go-to-market structure. So the goal of the reorganization for Atos is to be more relevant to clients, what they need for their business, to better address topics that are tied to the industries that they operate in. And Atos constantly evolves its portfolio and resources to align with those industries. For example, very recently, the company expanded its relationship with IBM and opened an Atos Cloud Center of Excellence to specifically support clients in financial services industry and to address their security and regulatory requirements and cloud needs when they move applications to the cloud. Atos is growing revenue at rates that are close to the average trailing 12-month year-to-year growth because it's very close to the red dotted line. So this average growth is for the 30 vendors of the benchmark. And the company maintains a very sound strategy around expanding in digital cloud, security, and decarbonization. Those four areas are the growth areas of expansion and is making inroads in those segments, which collectively accounted for 52% of revenue in 3Q21. However, Atos faces near-term challenges because it recently had top management reshuffling with a change at the global CEO level. It happened in October. The company is going through internal transformation tied to improving performance in North America and in Germany, and it's also looking to optimize its assets by partnering in commoditized infrastructure services areas. So those activities in the near term make Atos vulnerable to rising competitive pressures and to still ongoing pandemic-related restrictions. So we will expect to see Atos shift towards the right side of the graph in the coming quarters, and we'll keep track of its performance. Boz, on to you.
Thank you, Lisa. So I want to highlight Accenture here. It's certainly a vendor everyone is aware of in the market. couple of things just to point here real quick. Accenture is now the largest vendor in terms of a revenue size within the IT services benchmark. It started taking over IBM just about over 18 months ago, and it has been maintaining that position well through the pandemic and in 2021. Accenture's revenue growth is certainly also among the leading within the benchmark. And it kind of taking a step back and tying it to the headline of the slide here, the reorg and the new strategies. It's worth pointing to the Accenture's kind of a pivot from operating group's P&L into geo-specific P&L just as the pandemic struck back on March 1st, 2020. So there were certainly a lot of questions that we pressed Accenture with. We asked, making sure to understand what's going on and where the company's heading. You know, the timing kind of like was, okay, they're making a big rework in terms of at least a P&L perspective, but how that work and how the client's going to be managed. And in reality, while the P&L was reshuffled, in reality, the way the clients were managed stayed true to the core of Accenture's value proposition around industry-specific value proposition. But what the geo-specific P&L enabled Accenture is to pool resources a little bit easier across the organization from Accenture's businesses, Accenture Strategy and Consulting, Accenture Interactive, Accenture Operations, Accenture Technology. So the ability of Accenture to kind of streamline and then tap into the the resources at scale. And going through an integrated scale, but also managing local and regional resources when and where needed, helped them to kind of address kind of some shifting patterns in buyers' patterns when it came to, I understand you need to have a global scale, but also make sure you can speak the local language, understand the local culture, and so forth. So it was a risky move. I don't think anyone anticipated the pandemic when Accenture had probably taken that decision. And certainly, just like everyone, Accenture had a challenging 2Q20. But quickly after, as Accenture was going through, the internal reorg and the results in 2Q 2021, a year later, certainly highlighting the success of that pivot as the growth in the 2Q21 was over 20% in US dollars. So certainly a successful pivot so far. One can say, well, everyone is rebounding well because of the growth in cloud and the reorg. True, but when you're talking about 600,000 plus organization and managing 200 plus over partners and still executing at the scale, it certainly there's some highlights to point there for Accenture. One big kind of a warning sign that I want to kind of make it not just all great and pretty for Accenture, but something to we're keeping an eye out for is the service quality. Because we know that, as Patrick pointed out, there's a lot of, attrition is rising, and it's really about the war for talent is intensifying. So we are keeping a close eye and in our conversations with their partners and with their buyers about how well it's, Accenture delivering on the SLAs. We haven't heard any kind of a missteps so far. But it's certainly something that we are keeping a close eye, especially as the attrition is something that Accenture is not immune to, and we'll keep an eye and see how they do in the next 12 months. But I wanted to kind of point that pivot to geo-specific P&L just from an outside, but inside under the hood is really about still managing the clients at the industry level, still able to pull resources from across the business. So that kind of makes Accenture who they are and kind of have reached that household name status these days. Patrick, I'm not sure if you had any kind of a wrap-up comment on that slide, but you want to turn it back to Alita.
Perfect. And thanks, boss. I think it's really important to point out that the IT services benchmark is a quarterly product. It's one of the sort of the key elements that we lean on here within TBR to understand what's happening in the market. And to that end, we, before we go to emerging tech, we did expand the IT services benchmark in 2021. So, Alita, maybe you can walk through what those expansions were that are on the slide here.
Yes, Patrick, thank you. So we are always looking for ways to enrich our products and increase value for our clients. And we recently did that for the IT services benchmark. The report remains organized by service lines and geographies, but we're essentially adding new layers to our analysis, focusing on industries and geographies. And we alternate the topics each quarter. So in 1Q21, we did a deep dive on the industrial solutions, manufacturing, and automotive industry. In 2Q21, we did a deep dive on the Asia Pacific region. And in 3Q21, we plan to add a deep dive on financial services. And the 3Q21 IT services benchmark will publish in early January. So I'll give you some highlights on the topics from 1Q21 and 2Q21. On the left side, we have the industrial solutions, manufacturing, and automotive view. So enterprises in the sector weathered the worst of the pandemic through 3Q20. And you can see that dip in revenue growth on the graph. So they experienced challenges due to country lockdowns across the globe. And those lockdowns caused major supply chain and production disruptions really at the onset of the pandemic in 2020. During the initial times of the challenges, clients, with the support of IT services providers, made the necessary run-the-business changes to improve operational efficiencies and to reduce costs. After 3Q20, clients and IT services vendors evolved their relationships and started jointly working to ensure that clients' IT and workforces are modernized, they're secure and digitally enabled, and operations are resilient. And then in 1Q21 and 2Q21, we're seeing an acceleration in revenue growth in the industry sector. The vendors are investing in digital twin solutions to enhance their supply chain capabilities. They're also investing in digital sales and marketing and in artificial intelligence and machine learning capabilities so that they can offset any pressures and support the growth that we see for the past quarter. On the right side of the graph, we have the Asia Pacific view. In Asia Pacific, while the pandemic-related pressures slowed Asia Pacific revenue growth during the most of 2020 and 1Q21, regional revenue growth accelerated in 2Q21, supported by the gradual lifting of restrictions due to vaccine rollouts across the region. We're seeing really an increased interest from IT services vendors to position locally and to expand their market reach with clients in Asia Pacific to diversify their global revenues during 2022, because Asia Pacific right now is mostly used as a global service delivery location, and it's the smallest in terms of revenue share as percent of total revenue for the 30 vendors in the IT services benchmark. So the vendors that in the benchmark are ramping up activities around establishing local market resources to serve clients that are based in Asia Pacific and also to serve global clients that have operations in the region.
Okay, Elisa's breaking a little bit, unfortunately, so we're I'll hand this over to Boz to lead off, and then we'll hear from Evan.
Thank you, Patrick. So let's jump here real quick on the blockchain component. So the graph on the left is really about from our digital transformation voice to customer research. I wanted to kind of highlight two major trends around blockchain and IoT. Those are two of the kind of the emerging trends that emerged and continue to emerge essentially looking to 2022. I'll start with the blockchain, which is we kind of went into a little deeper as part of our digital transformation portfolio this year, publishing market landscape. So blockchain, when we talk about to buyers about blockchain, they are still seeing there's a little bit of hesitation, I should say, overall. In the market as a top priority to support digital transformation. And that was really the sentiment we heard back in the spring. But going after, 6 months later, we just wrapped up a round of research for blockchain market landscape. Buyers and vendors that are part of that ecosystem starting to warm up to the trend, and we expect that to continue in 2022 and beyond. Big factor that we see for blockchain accelerating is the advent of DeFi, decentralized finance. We're all aware of the cryptocurrencies being dominating the headlines over the last 12 to 18 months. But banks and government authorities have begun to pay much more attention and closer attention compared to previously labeling it as a fad. So the decentralized finance as a concept, it's really enabling, how it will disrupt peer-to-peer finance, and what it enables is that the banks are starting to test the water of the blockchain and provide strong use case moving forward, because there's a lot of the consumer finance that are providing of a less risk when it comes to testing technology. So banks are starting to embark in and investing into DeFi kind of technologies, and DeFi as an enabling medium of currency exchange. So from that point forward, it's about understanding and measuring the risk. So banks, while DeFi technically eliminates the banks, because that's kind of like the idea behind the DeFi is to bypass the middleman, banks themselves are starting to invest, but they are testing the water with consumer finance, investors. Where we see the bigger splash, obviously, is the institutional investors in trying to push forward. But for that to happen, we need to have the role of the banks, the governments. And we're starting to see governments across the world really testing the water as well. And the frameworks are really in various stages across the different governments. They will see governments showing interest, researching the digital dollar project in the U.S., which is an ongoing right now. There's some expected outcomes in the spring of 2022. There's other governments that are experimenting, or a lot of governments that are more mature are implementing with digital yuan in China, which is, again, essentially using the blockchain beyond just the all known use case of supply chain optimization. So which we believe, all this like the government involvement and banks starting to test the water beyond just the personal and kind of a consumer oriented investors will drive broader adoption. So something to look forward to. We are seeing, a momentum, much better sentiment from comparing to the spring. But while blockchain is kind of ranking towards the bottom right now when it comes to technology as part of the priorities for buyers in digital transformation, certainly something to continue to keep an eye out for. So that's on the blockchain. I'll turn it over to Evan to make a couple of highlights from the IoT points as well.
Thank you, Boz. TBR launched its inaugural IoT market landscape earlier this year, and it was really to try to better understand the growing activity that we were seeing across the technology value chain as these players sought to capitalize on the promising market opportunity. For instance, partner efforts by platforms like Microsoft with industrial specialists, including Siemens and Rockwell, to kind of try to build these industry standard data protocols. And then on the other side of the equation, the IT services firms, there was a multitude of acquisitions from companies like Cognizant and Wipro as they sought to add these, IoT experts to their existing engineering services businesses to expand the scope a bit further deep into the client's organization. The activity by these players comes as no surprise when viewed in conjunction with the findings from our latest DT Voice of Customer research, which is to the bottom left there, and shows that IoT technologies now rank second in adoption as part of the enterprise's digital transformation efforts. So why then hasn't the market been able to scale to its full potential? In a conversation yesterday with an executive at an IoT services firm, as part of the research being conducted for the next round of the market landscape, the interviewee perhaps summarized it best when he said, IoT technology has been here for a very long time. First, it was machine to machine. Now it is just called IoT. The issue is not a lack of technology. It is a lack of standardization from tooling to protocols to security. This statement resonates very strongly with the challenges which TBR found in that first IoT market landscape, as that lack of standards makes it nearly impossible to establish the necessary partner ecosystems to scale those solutions in the market. While the challenges exist and they go well beyond just the standardization issues that were just mentioned, the adoption is slowly occurring, but frankly, it's not at the level of maturity which one would expect after being inundated with a player's marketing campaign touting smart manufacturing hubs and supply chain optimization. So where is adoption today? TBR classifies the IoT adoption curve in three phases. So Horizon 1, Horizon 2, and Horizon 3. Or as the IoT executive stated to us yesterday, digitization, insights, and then automation. So in layman's terms, these would be defined as the following. Digitization is really just the embedding of connectivity into these actual physical assets. Insights would be harnessing that data from the devices in a specific single process to drive efficiencies. And then third, automation is harnessing multiple interrelated processes and using technology like AI to automate and proactively drive organizational efficiencies, not just in the context of one process, but in the context of all these processes. Today, we feel the majority of these clients remain in the digitization phase, but are increasingly shifting towards insights. and some beginning to explore new ways of using the data from their connected device ecosystems to improve the operational efficiency of assets supporting the specific process. But they're not ready to yet leverage the technologies like AI or ML to intelligently automate these processes as a whole to improve the overall organizational efficiency. And the analogy I have probably said to many of you on this call already in a prior webinar is that it is because, if you think about modernization efforts, it's kind of a rising tide lifts all ships. So in the context of, say, supply chain, it's all well and good that you want to, automate that process. But if you don't have a modernized ERP system that you can link that data into from the supply chain, applications, it doesn't do you much good. In the next round of the IoT market landscape, what we're really going to try to explore and better understand are some of those use cases that are driving adoption today. The initial ones we're going to look at are really under the umbrella of logistics and supply chain across sectors like retail, pharma, or high-quality goods, given that these sectors in particular are being impacted the most by the ongoing supply chain issues across the globe at the moment. And these are all challenges which, play directly into the strengths and outcomes which IoT solutions can bring to the client. And with that, I'll pass it over to Kevin for the next leg of the predictions marathon.
Thank you. Yes, I just wanted to take a moment here and just kind of discuss some changes that we've had internally. Back in about halfway through 2021, we took over coverage as a cloud professional services benchmark with myself as the lead. And, since changing ownership from our cloud practice to our professional services practice here within TBR, we'll be incrementally introducing, different views, different analysis, to kind of complement that existing benchmark as it stands. Kind of one key example is that last iteration that we published. It was a bit of a call out of, the addition of the cloud platforms and those services players and, in an alliances module. It was highlighted the AWS, Azure, Google Cloud Platform practices of Accenture, DXC, and TCS. It called out some investments and trends, and, we began the process of kind of estimating those resources, accredited resources, and trained resources, and also some revenue estimates for these professional services firms on those cloud hyperscalers. As time permits and as information arises, well, we plan to extend that out and, build on that analysis over time with kind of the ultimate goal of a standalone product dedicated to cloud and services alliances, really not in the not too distant future, but just kind of wanted to weigh in there on our plans for that.
Excellent. Thanks, Kevin. Yeah, I think it's really important. We're continuing to expand the coverage, even as we take on some of the new areas, at least new to us. And I'll hand it over to Elitza again, who earned herself a point because I cut her off. So now she's tied with John Kroll in terms of this. But we'll hit the last trend here from 2021, and then we'll jump into 2022. Go ahead, Elitza.
Thank you, Patrick. And just wanted to touch on the resources side of the equation. We looking at people. So we're seeing an increase in employee utilization and attrition, both sequentially and year to year. And it's very visible on the two charts here on this slide. In terms of utilization, while the hybrid and remote working models are proving to be viable options for IT services vendors during the pandemic, as most of the resources are, working from home, they are pushing employee productivity to the limit because people tend to work now longer hours at home, and this is becoming really a common practice, and we're seeing this in the numbers. Last 2 quarters, utilization spiked sequentially, and there is, digital burnout has now been a very common occurrence across employees of IT services vendors. Employee attrition, the gradual elevation and alleviation of pandemic pressures has enabled employees to start looking for new job opportunities. There's more security, I guess. They feel more safer to change jobs. We've also begun to see multiple vendors launching hiring campaigns, some being more aggressive than others, but it's a common topic across vendors. So they want to fill resources and address the demand for digital transformation. So they're actively hiring both in universities and but also looking at poaching talent from competitors, which essentially has been increasing employee attrition since the end of 2020.
Excellent. Thanks, Elitsa. So now let's take a look at 2022. These are the three trends. You can see them here. You can read them. You can read more about these in the predictions documents, which we've been publishing consistently for the last couple of weeks. I think the management consulting one came out today. So what we're going to touch on today, though, out of all of those predictions documents is sustainability, digital's death, and then changes that are coming in the U.S. federal IT sector. So we'll start with sustainability, and if I can work the slides, there we go. We'll have John Kroll jump in here and tell us what's going on in the sustainability space. John, you're up.
Thanks, Patrick. So I'm going to try to be quick here. First, I'll go over our plans to cover sustainability in 2022. With the help of Patrick and some other team members, we're going to be aiming to provide some analysis on the key IT services and software, cloud, and platform vendors that are emerging as leaders in the space. Obviously, sustainability crosses a number of different topics, but our focus is going to be entirely on the decarbonization as the low-hanging fruit. And our analysis will fall into two tracks. Track one is going to be essentially what are vendors doing to decarbonize themselves, and track two is what are vendors doing to decarbonize their customers and their clients. So that's going to be the basic framework and some of the questions that we'll answer. But I want to go over a couple really important figures that came out of Boz's Voice of the Customer research, which I hope to gain another point from Patrick for acknowledging, related to sustainability, which is broader than our decarbonization focus, but still can help us guide our thinking as we go forward. One of those numbers which is not visible on the slide is that over 3/4 of the surveyed respondents were planning to increase their spending in sustainability services over the next year. So that to us suggests that there's pretty healthy demand for and room to grow for vendors in 2022 for those with strong capabilities and diversified offerings. And it also tells us that organizations, the overall focus on sustainability may be longer lived than what we've seen in the past. But before we get too ahead of ourselves, I want to draw your attention now to this chart, again coming out of Boz's Voice of the Customer research, which maps out organizations' reasons for investing in sustainability services. And 3 of the top 5 here are related to profit rather than the planet, specifically using it as a competitive advantage, improving the company's financial performance, and taking advantage of government-backed incentive programs. So, in fact, caring for the environment ranked towards the bottom. So, although like I said, we expect it to be longer lived than what we've seen in the past, there is a hint that potential macroeconomic or policy headwinds could change the course of vendors' initiatives and will pressure vendors to drive more tangible outcomes, which leads into what we see as being really 2 clear differentiators for vendors. First is that vendors that lead by example with investments in their own internal decarbonization and provide transparent reporting and put out thought leadership will be most successful in establishing a strong position in the market and attracting new clients. Second, we see adopting an outcome-based framework and risk-sharing models as really being the key differentiator and will help build trust and follow through on projects. For example, we heard earlier in the year in a virtual chat with a services provider that is taking that exact approach with its clients. It's establishing emissions targets and providing a carbon offset compensation plan if those targets aren't hit. So strategies like that will really separate the leaders from the laggards as that market evolves. And I will turn it now back to Boz, I think.
Thanks, John. So with keep referencing digital transformation voice of the customer research, and these two graphs are also as part of it. Really, the key takeaway that we got out of that research when it came to the state of the market, digital transformation programs are maturing. The buyers that are in the state of true transformation actually is, and they're kind of going through the phases, is really beyond the peak essentially, and majority of the budgets are oriented towards managed services. And that's where buyers are prioritizing, trying to make sure that the investment that they spend the last 3 to 5 years are actually paying off now, and that's where they're starting to looking for service quality and better partner ecosystem development and management and so forth. So, but one thing that Patrick hinted is what we're looking into, 2022 as a trend is digital kind of becoming a debt or becoming the norm, the table stakes, and really the pendulum swinging back to business transformation. And while the graph suggests here a lot of the areas where vendors continue to support buyers is around technology, implementation, and technology is really about enabling digital transformation, which we don't expect that to change much. Where we see the long-tail opportunities about understanding and tying up the business processes and the business outcomes, which is not the new trend, but certainly the digital and the cloud and everything else that's been going on in terms of like marketing, as well as pushing the envelope of the buyer side, is now maturing, because the buyers are, there's a new generation of buyers. There are tech-savvy buyers. They are expecting everyone to come with them with the technology knowledge that maybe their predecessor did not have. So knowing the language, understanding the language is a key element. So when we talk about digital being there, it's more about digital transformation swinging into more business transformation, understanding how to manage the process, how to tie in the outcomes, how to leverage the technology. So that new generational buyers that are stepping into the helm of many of the large organizations will not be wowed with a simple visualization tool. They would not be just saying, okay, well, we heard that from buyers saying the data science becoming the new Excel and kind of like the table stakes of the future. So it's about understanding how to tie in outcomes to the technologies that have been implemented and used, because buyers are also spending a lot of it on so many services. It's about using the insights from those managed services and bringing it back in the feedback loop into the front of the engagement. So that will kind of give some good implications for vendors that have a good integrated scale when it comes to having the back end and the front end connected. With that, turn over to John. John Costas.
Yes, thank you, Boz. I'm going to spend the next few minutes, a bit of a gear shift here, talking about what we have observed happening in the U.S. federal IT market. The United States federal government is the single largest buyer of technology services in the world, and we're tracking the companies at the top of the market with our federal IT services benchmark. The graphic here, just to orient everyone to what is being illustrated on the slide, the graphic here represents the average year-to-year growth in 3 areas for the companies that we track. First of all, the federal defense market, the Department of Defense. Secondly, the U.S. federal civilian market. And then third, all other public sector markets where the companies that we track have operations. I'm not going to focus on that latter market. I'm going to restrict my comments to the U.S. federal market, where in the most recent quarter, which is the second calendar quarter of 2021, the most recent quarter that we have a complete data set for, we saw 11 of the 13 companies that we track accelerate their growth on the civilian side versus defense. And I think the 2 biggest reasons for that, number one, a low base effect. In the year ago compare was the height of the pandemic. That was especially in areas like health IT, that was the quarter in which the pandemic had its worst impact. The vendors that we track, federal contractors, were unable to get their project teams onto client sites. And you saw that reflected in the revenue growth rates a year ago. The market has steadily rebounded since then, especially on the civilian side and especially within the health IT area. The commitment to digital transformation remains strong. We've witnessed accelerating civilian agency investment in the federal space to modernizing communications infrastructures, implementing cloud and data center solutions, and enhancing, especially as I mentioned, enhancing health IT systems. We expect civilian growth will remain robust. And this is also consistent with the stated budget priorities of the Biden administration. They've clearly indicated that there is going to be a shift. There is going to be a shift in budget priorities away from the DoD, away from the defense sector, and to civilian agencies, and especially in the areas of health IT. That said, defense spending on digital transformation also remains robust. Multi-service strategic awards have started to ramp up. There were some delays earlier in the year where projects have now kicked off. The DoD continues to lay the groundwork for the eventual migration of all military IT systems into a general purpose cloud, and they're increasingly doling out a multitude of foundational cloud programs to the vendors that we track to build that baseline. I do see growth flipping. The graphic here suggests that growth will decelerate, but remain fairly robust as we move into the latter quarters of 2021 and into 2022. I do eventually see the growth flipping strongly in favor of the civilian sector. Early data from the third calendar quarter indicates that many of the projects on the defense side that were delayed either as a result of the turmoil, the post-election turmoil earlier this year, or some lingering COVID-19 issues, many of those projects kicked off. We're going to see a spike on the defense side, I think, but that's going to be short-lived as we moved into 2022. Overall, though, we expect growth in the federal IT market to remain fairly robust into 2022. And as I said, this is consistent with what the Biden administration has indicated, where they will. I think the budget request was many times in favor of the civilian side versus defense. We expect that that's really going to begin to play out as the budget process, the budget machinations around the fiscal 23 budget move forward next year. And any slowdown in defense spending will probably hold off until 2023. So with that, I'm going to hand the presentation off to my colleague James, who will talk in more detail about what we're seeing specifically in the mission systems side, I believe, of the U.S. federal market.
Thanks, John. So we're excited here at TBR to expand our coverage for 5 vendors going forward, including L3 and its 4 segments, so integrated mission systems, space and airborne systems, communication systems, and aviation systems. Lockheed Martin's rotary and mission systems, aeronautics, as well as missile and fire control segments, both Boeing Global Services and Boeing Defense, Space and Security, Northrop Grumman's defense systems and mission systems segments, but lastly covering Raytheon missiles and defense. We'll be covering these vendors due to their expected influence on the defense market over the coming decade, as the space market, missile and propulsion systems markets, among others, heat up. With contractors looking to reach new heights, having made and being on course to make some prolific acquisitions and establish some notable alliances to secure multi-billion-dollar contracts at home and abroad, TBR thought it would be the perfect time to cover these companies. Now, on to the lightning round.
Excellent. Thank you, John, and thank you, James. And yeah, excited to have that new coverage in our federal space. So I've told the analysts they no longer have 90 seconds. They have 45 to 60 seconds to get it done. And before we do that, I just want to show you, here's the coverage that you can get from us across the IT services space. This is where we look at digital transformation. Everybody will be getting these slides after the presentation. Here's where we cover innovation and transformation centers in a special market landscape. Again, everyone will be getting these slides. You can see the coverage here. And now we'll do the lightning round, then we'll get to your questions. Each analyst has 45 to 60 seconds to convince me they know what they're talking about. And Megan, go.
Going into 2022, Wipro will carry over its resource management and corporate structure improvements from the second half of 2021, which included a renewed focus on employee empowerment and company culture to overcome the talent market shortage and simplifying business lines to promote operational efficiencies. These trends work to counteract IT service vendors' rising attrition, of which Wipro reported a 20.5% turnover rate in 3Q21, though far less severe in comparison to Cognizant, who continues to surpass 30%. Under CEO Terry Delaporte's leadership, Wipro is entering the new year with a simplified business plan that highlights the security of large contracts, worth anywhere between 200 and 300 million, and leveraging its professionals to enable leading R&D and innovation, particularly within the cloud space. In late November, Wipro announced that nearly a third of its total headcount has been dedicated to its cloud practice, indicating its capability outlook is ramping up in this area. In the coming quarters, TBR expects Wipro to further build out its hyperscaler partnerships, similar to its 2021 strategy through the launch of dedicated platform business units with vendors such as Google, AWS, and Microsoft. Wipro will leverage such relationships to work alongside its growing team of cloud professionals and to better compete against like low-cost peers.
Okay, who is supposed to be next in the lightning round? John Kroll.
So I think we're pretty bullish on India Inc., but I'm going to pitch why TCS will remain the India Inc. leader and, in fact, eat away at its peers' market share in 2022 overall. First of all, it's on a really good track. It's going to on track to grow 15% according to our estimates for this year. But what's really key here is that TCS is moving beyond its traditional strengths. So traditionally, it's scale, it's a labor arbitrage model. But now it's showing us that it's more than just a massive and affordable outsourcer. It can pivot its resources and capitalize on new technology trends as quickly as its peers. It went remote in 2020 with 500,000 workers in a week, and it's now just unleashed 3 new business units, really focusing on the biggest cloud opportunities with AWS, Microsoft, and Google. And overall, it's just becoming a much more willing and capable partner, doubling down on the training and collaboration that will firmly plant it into those respective sales channels and possibly translate into more referrals going forward.
Capgemini is one of the European growth leaders in the benchmark with a strong growth trajectory over the past few quarters, expanding activities around business and supporting across its business and supporting clients' digital transformations. The company has sustained bookings growth year to year during the past 6 quarters, despite the pandemic pressures. It launched joint initiatives with strategic partners in areas such as cloud data, AI, and also accelerated hiring with nearly 20,000 net additions in 3Q21. Such factors prompted Capgemini to elevate its revenue growth and operating margin outlook for the full year for the second time during 2021. Establishing digital design capabilities that support customer-related activities by folding design and strategy company Frog into Capgemini Invent improves Capgemini's ability to create and scale new business models, leading with strategy and transformation consulting services. Acquisitions in North America, such as in the public sector, provide revenue diversification and support Capgemini's strategy to diversify its geographic revenues. Such activities will enable Capgemini to sustain its strong revenue growth into 2022.
Just like PwC, which was not part of the IT services benchmark bubble chart, I want to highlight KPMG, which we believe will put a stake in the ground and disrupt the big 4 and IT services status quo. While the firm will be far from closing IT services revenue gap with Deloitte and Accenture, the firm is well positioned to learn from peers' missteps and develop a hybrid approach to its digital transformation value proposition. A well-managed 3-way partnership between KPMG, Microsoft, and Infosys could potentially out-advise, out-tech, and out-deliver most of its peers and allow KPMG to define the ends, in quotation, of its end-to-end value proposition differently by its rivals. We recognize that internal buy-in and leadership alignment is a must and in order for the firm to pursue such change. But identifying catalysts for change, either internally and or as a result of external forces, will also enable KPMG to go to market and manage its partner ecosystem differently by the end of 2022.
So a vendor from the U.S. federal IT market that I think you need to keep your eye on is Leidos. They are they have the largest IT services revenue base in the federal IT market. What caught my attention recently was at their investor day when they said that they fully believe and fully expect that their growth over the next 3 years, which would take them through 2024, their growth is going to outpace the growth of their addressable market by 200 to 300 basis points. How are they going to do that when they already have the largest revenue base in federal IT? I think they're going to have to look at two markets. I think they're going to have to look at the defense and civilian clients outside of the U.S. government. They're going to have to look they already have a strong presence in Australia and the UK. I think they're going to have to look at continental Europe. But I also see Leidos making a more aggressive push into the commercial market. They have the chops in cybersecurity. They have the scale to deliver enterprise-wide digital transformation, much like they've done in the U.S. federal market, delivering agency-wide digital transformation, and they have the track record of doing so. I would expect if Leidos does make a move into the commercial market, they're going to be going after at least a Global 2000, perhaps more specifically into the Fortune 500.
Lockheed Martin will be looking to reassert itself in the market come the second half of 2022 against improving peers like Raytheon and Northrop Grumman by integrating Aerojet Rocketdyne into its team. Pending approval from the FTC, the acquisition would disrupt Northrop's unrivaled dominance in the missiles and propulsion systems market since it purchased Orbital Attack, while Raytheon would have to fund Lockheed to continue receiving engines. Lockheed will also look to leverage alliances to secure long-term annuity revenue-generating contracts as it partners with Boeing on the Defiant X in a bid to secure the FLRAA contract from the U.S. Army, while partnering with state-run aerospace companies in India to increase its chances of delivering the fleet of F-21s to the Republic. For the next few months, though, like its industry peers, Lockheed Martin's going to have to deal with supply chain pressures that look to further contract its operating margins.
Something interesting I'll be watching during 2022. Could this be the year that DXC achieves year-to-year revenue growth? But let me clarify, not annual revenue growth, just 1 quarter of revenue growth on a year-to-year basis. I mean, just to provide some context, since its formation in early 2017, it's yet to achieve organic revenue growth on a year-to-year basis. But however, DXC's revenue has been stabilizing and even, captured sequential revenue growth. And further, DXC has, set a target of 1 to 3% organic annual revenue growth for its fiscal 2024 year, which is just about 5 quarters away. With much of its restructuring executed, client reviews completed, and ongoing demand for critical IT infrastructure modernization, the conditions are favorable for DXC to, finally achieve that year-to-year organic revenue growth on a quarterly basis.
IT service providers have an opportunity to evolve their traditional partner models with platform providers to embrace more of an ISV type role. This prediction is best viewed through the lens of players' industry cloud aspirations. Platform providers like Microsoft and AWS, and even cloud app leaders like Salesforce are quickly establishing these industry suites across sectors like healthcare. And the value of these suites stem in part from the pre-built data models which they provide to the enterprise client. For instance, Microsoft and Salesforce healthcare clouds each tie into the key data hubs of the industry, the electronic health record systems of Cerner and Epic and others, and allow the client to then easily track and manage that information. But these industry suites are very early in their development, and while industry data access is key, the real value stems from solutions and services which this data is being leveraged. Establishing these solution suites will demand greater involvement of ISV partners who possess an understanding of the vertically specific needs and desired outcomes of customers and can then be used by platform providers to quickly build solution breadth across their industry suites. This dynamic presents a strong opportunity for IT services consultancy organizations who work with these same customers and possess a deep understanding of their processes, insight which will allow them to then articulate the value of these solutions to enable their technology enable their processes. This partner approach has been recognized by companies like PwC, who have established the Connected Solutions business, and the majority of that group's solutions and services are built atop Azure. So if 2021 was the year of IT services firms establishing platform partner business units to vie for the share of the cloud migration and implementation opportunity, 2022 should be the year we see these same BUs evolve to support the solution level needs of these same platform partners as an ISV-esque type partner.
A vendor that I would call out for differentiation is HCL. I know when they acquired IBM software products a few years ago now, they kind of set the standard for a lot of their peers and competitors as to how to properly integrate products and software offerings within their portfolio. And so kind of moving forward, the vendors are looking to them as the best examples to how to effectively integrate these product offerings within their strategy. And HCL is effective in tucking in that software as well as staying true to its legacy and traditional assets. Back to you, Patrick.
Excellent, thank you. And Kelly, you were so fast, you caught me off guard. I wasn't prepared to come back on yet, but that was great. We are at the top of the hour, so two things before we sort of announce the winner of our little lightning round. First, again, all the slides are going to be available. You can either reach out to us and get them, or you'll get an email with them. Please, if you have a chance, put in comments and let us know how we did, what value you got out of this webinar. There were questions that came in we weren't able to get to. We will answer those. The analysts will reach out specific to those questions, specific to those vendors, and get back to you. So with all that, again, thank you. And I will say, Megan mentioned attrition and talent. I think that's important because that's one of the most important trends we're looking at right now. I really like that James brought up supply chain. It's one of the things we're looking at now, and I know we're going to be looking at in 2022. John Kroll, of course, started off with politeness and then really brought it with some details on TCS. But shockingly, I'm actually going to give the win, I think, to the guy that we call the Prince of Darkness, Kevin Colopy. Not only was he speculative, not only did he hit on a company that we talk about a lot that has definitely had some struggles with DXC, but actually he brought some humor to the conversation. So congratulations, Kevin. I have no idea what you win for a prize. But thank you all. A beer downstairs. Thank you all for attending, and take care. We'll talk soon.